We got a huge update out of Pittsburgh as an insider has revealed that the Penguins are open to moving more players than we anticipated, including Erik Karlsson, which has been in rumors, but a new name that is showing up a bit more is Bryan Rust, as he is apparently open to moving his no movement clause as Crosby's entering the twilight of his career. Pittsburgh has some huge decisions to make. We got to go into the reports and what some moves could look like, all coming up on this episode of Hat Trick HQ. But guys, before we get into the video, we are so close to 11,000, just over 100 subscribers away, and a huge portion of you, over 90% of you watching this video, are not subscribed. If just over 100 of you hit that button, it's completely free, and you want to stay updated on all the latest news, if that sounds good to you, hit the button down below. We'll hit that 11K in no time. Thank you for being here, Mark. Let's get right into it. We got to talk about a quote from Dave Pagnotta today of the fourth period. He had a bit of chatter. He said the chatter doesn't stop, so they shared a bit of it, and he had some very interesting quotes, and we'll dive into exactly what he said here. The main things to highlight it said the Pittsburgh Penguins are open to moving Michael Bunting, Drew O'Connor, Marcus Pettersson, Anthony Beauvillier, Bryan Rust, and Erik Karlsson. He does say they haven't approached Rust about the no movement clause, but he is open to moving. If we go directly into the quote that he said, my understanding is they still haven't approached him about it, but he would be open to options if the Pittsburgh Penguins push that narrative that they want to make a move. So Bryan Rust, Mark, like, this isn't a name I've seen circulated a whole lot. Now, a bit contradictory saying they haven't approached him about it, but that he may be open to moving it, waiving it. I don't know, but he's such a great player, and I feel like he'd be in demand by a lot of teams around the league.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Bryan Rust, we can see that he has 19 goals, 20 assists for 39 points on the season. The biggest thing about Bryan Rust, if you don't really follow his career, he's been a consistent 20 goal scorer in the National Hockey League for the last 6 seasons. Obviously, he has to score one more goal this year to make it. The biggest thing is he has been Crosby's right-hand man. He is on a decent contract, 5.1 for 3 more seasons after this one. In my opinion, looking at this entire Pittsburgh roster, Bryan Rust, out of all the options that seem to be on the table, is a little intriguing for a lot of teams. You're seeing a guy that can be a consistent goal scorer. He has playoff experience. We've seen him play in the top 6 for a majority of this. He can play with superstars. He's a great complementary piece. Looking at him, it's going to be quite interesting what the Penguins would want to kind of pry him off their roster. Looking at it, as we said, he's a guy that can consistently score you 20 goals. The biggest problem is age, 32 years old. He is 36 at the end of this contract. I don't know if you feel the same way, Josh, but looking at Russ, is this a guy that you could probably see a contender that has maybe a 2 to 3 window to go out, pick this guy up and say, hey, he's going to be in our top 6. He can play on the top line with our superstars. He can make an impact. And do you think he's worth what Pittsburgh might be asking for?
I mean, that's tough to say, right? Because some teams can fit that cap, some teams can't. You might have to move a player or, make a cap dump move before bringing in a guy like this. But objectively, like, again, like you said, that's not a bad contract to have a guy that can play up in your lineup, whether it's in the top 6 or even as like a really good third liner. Like, it works. And at 5 million, like, you have to imagine if he was a free agent going into this offseason with salary cap increasing so much, which does play a big factor into this as well, he'd be getting probably closer to 6, if not more, right? So looking at it that way, getting this guy at $5 million is a guy who can play with good players, who can score 20 goals year in, year out. And like, his game isn't that kind of game where I'd be extremely concerned that he'd all of a sudden fall off a cliff either. He's just like overall decent. So I don't know, like, I can see it happening. The problem is I don't know what Pittsburgh would want for him, right? Like, as Penguins fans, let us know down below what you guys would want for Bryan Rust. But again, like, it's that track record versus the contract versus plus the term, right? A lot of contenders, your windows are usually only a few years, right? If you're considering buying at the deadline. And with a guy like Rust, yeah, he's a near point per game player. He's been really, really, really good this year. But if you're buying him, you are locking him in for a few years. Yeah, you could probably trade him in that third year if you really need to. But I think you got a really narrow window of teams who'd be willing to take on a contract like this. Maybe it's not even a contender. Maybe it's a team that's trying to take that next step and want to bring a guy like him in to help mentor the young guys. So in terms of what Pittsburgh would be asking for, you have to imagine for a guy of his talent on a reasonable contract, they're probably asking for at least a decent prospect or some solid draft capital. But even then, Mark, I don't even know, because I'm still not sure what Pittsburgh is actually doing this season, because where they are in the standings, like, I don't know if they're trying to make a playoff push. I don't know if they're trying to go full rebuild or if they're trying to go retool. So I think the asking price could really be varied for him.
But I mean, looking at this as well, when we see the list of people, the biggest thing Kyle Dubas has made it very clear they don't want to retain on long contracts. I mean, looking at this team, even on defense, Erik Karlsson is a name that's been thrown around. His contract is quite hefty. You can work your way down all the defensemen, but even the forwards, there's a lot of guys that are on multiple year deals that seem to be on the block. We've seen Dubas, like I said, make it very clear they do not want to retain on a contract that's going to hurt this team. Crosby is still on this team. They have a window they want to keep open. Obviously, the window is closing very hard this year. Second last in the East. They're a few
Still
points
close, though.
ahead of Buffalo, yes. But the biggest thing is the games in hand as well. You can see the Islanders above them, 49 games played. The Penguins sitting at 53. I mean, looking at this list, Josh, of guys that have been made available per the fourth period, looking at this, is there anyone else that really sticks out to you?
I mean, yeah, like, first of all, I think Michael Bunting's good, but, like, I don't know if he's going to fetch that much. Anthony Beauvillier just hasn't really worked out. I mean, look at the list of point scorers here. There is one guy, and I know we talked about this before recording this show, but it's got to be Marcus Pettersson. I mean, his name has been in trade rumors seemingly all season, right? I mean, he's an expiring defenseman who can play the PK, get some decent amount of points, right? So he has a bit of an offensive upside. So I think a lot of people could be looking in for him. He actually makes maybe more sense to trade than Bryan Rust for me, right? Trading Bryan Rust sends a big signal to your core as to what you're doing. It tells you that you're no longer being a competitive team necessarily, because if you're competing, why not keep him? So Marcus Pettersson, though, any expiring contract, like, you can get some decent value for him, right? And you can fill that role with maybe some other players. Maybe you try to extend him, but probably not. I think Pettersson actually, for his contract, especially since Pittsburgh doesn't want to maybe retain on longer ones, maybe they retain on this one, maybe they get a third party to do it. I don't know, but I think he might be in talks even more than Rust come deadline time.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Marcus Pettersson, a name that always pops up when talking about this guy is the Canucks, who are looking for a left-handed defenseman to play behind Quinn Hughes, so he doesn't have to play majority of the game and carry most of the load. So maybe, like you said, this would be more intriguing. It's a one-year deal. The Penguins can retain on this. You could get a lot of value. I mean, defensemen go for quite a bit. Heading into deadline, like you said, a guy that can play the PK1. He put up almost 40 points last year with playing barely any power play time. So there is a value there. Do you think maybe if a team came out and said, hey, we'll throw you a first round pick, half retain this guy, do you think that's enough to maybe pry him from Pittsburgh? If like
Oh
half
yeah, I
retain?
think so. I mean, well, I think so. Yeah, I mean the full contract, no, but look, it's always hard to say. And you look at back at past deadlines, there have been a lot of trades where defensemen have gone for a lot more than anyone expected, right? Like way more than people expected. And a guy like Pedersen fills so many good roles, and especially for a team like maybe say Vancouver or another team looking for a solid left D who can eat some minutes, who can play the PK, like to them that's going to be worth it. And there's going to be a lot of teams bidding as well. You create a bidding war for him. Pittsburgh sells him to the highest bidder, right? And I think that could very well go up to a first round pick. We've heard reports of defensemen that I wouldn't say are quite as good as Marcus Pettersson. Reports of them potentially fetching first round picks, right? Now, again, he's a left hand shot, and right hand shots are usually more valuable, but no, it wouldn't shock me at all. I think Pettersson's really, really good, but there's a lot of other names here. Guys, we want to hear what you guys have to say because there's so many names coming out about the Pittsburgh Penguins. This Bryan Rust stuff is crazy. Karlsson, we've already heard a lot about. Marcus Pettersson, I want to hear what you guys think down below. Who will they move? Who will they keep? Are they going full rebuild? Well, we'd love to hear from you, but that'll do it for this episode of Hat Trick HQ. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll have a lot more videos just like this. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Mark Pye. We'll catch you in the next one.